Welcome to Biography Central. You are listening to Life of Sri Ramakrishna, a complete biography. Chapter 40, Jogindra Nath. About the year 1882, another young man of surpassing religious merit found his haven of peace at the feet of Sri Ramakrishna. This was Jogindra Nath, the eldest son of Nabin Chandra Ray Chaudhary, who came of an aristocratic Brahmin family of Dakshineshwar and was a man of the orthodox type. He owned very little property, and his only hope lay in his promising son, Jogin, who might one day be able to shoulder the responsibilities of his father. Jogin developed a religious tendency very early in life. Even when he was a child of 5, he was often overwhelmed by strange feelings. In the midst of play, a serious thought would suddenly cloud his face, and he would lose all interest in the sport. He would withdraw into a quiet corner and, looking at the sky, think, "Where am I? Certainly, I don't belong here. These are not my playmates. I have other friends and companions. I must have come from one of those stars. But which one? I don't know. And why am I here if I belong to another world? Is this all a dream?" Thoughts like these would trouble him, and he would be seized with a hankering for familiar regions. As he grew up, however, these boyish imaginations gradually left him. He evinced particular zeal in worship, often spending 2 or 3 hours daily in meditation. He was reading in a missionary school, but liked sacred books better than his textbooks. He was still in high school when he met Sri Ramakrishna. Jogin used to visit the garden of Rani Rasmani. One evening he found that a large concourse of men had gathered in and about a certain room in that garden, and were listening to something within with rapt attention. He had heard that an eccentric Brahmin who had formerly been a priest in that temple lived there. Jogin was curious to know what was going on, and drawing near the door listened attentively. From the first few words that fell on his ears, he understood that he whom local opinion nicknamed the Mad Priest was talking. In simple and homely language, he was explaining the philosophy of love. Jogin was caught in the spell of the words and stood transfixed. When the meeting dispersed, Jogin went home, saying to himself, "This man must be a saint who has seen God. People do not understand this, and therefore they laugh at him. How else can one account for such words of devotion, such divine love, and such ecstasy in the name of God? However, let me watch him more closely." The next day, he went straight to Sri Ramakrishna, who was glad to learn who he was. He said, "Well, you come of a family which is well known to me. Formerly, I often went to your house to hear the Bhagavata and other scriptures." He mentioned some elderly members who were very kind to him, and said, "It is well that we have come to know each other now. You must come often. You are born in a noble family and are possessed of many characteristics of spiritual greatness. You will easily advance on this path." Jogin was deeply impressed by the master's kind treatment and visited him daily. He kept this a secret from his parents, for they shared the common belief about the master. To throw them off the scent, he used to collect choice flowers for his father's worship. This contact with Sri Ramakrishna brought about a revolution in his ideas. The attainment of God became the sole object of his life. Though he knew that his academic studies would be of ultimate financial value to his family, yet he would not give his attention to the world, for he had learned from Sri Ramakrishna that through the renunciation of lust and wealth alone lay the path to the realization of God. At first, he tried to reconcile both God and material wealth. When unsuccessful, he gave up the attempt. He resolved not to marry. He would seek a job away from home and thus help the family. This arrangement, he thought, would enable him to pass most of his time in prayer and meditation. Thus determined, he said one day to his father, "It is useless for me to go to school anymore. Rather, I shall try to secure an appointment in some office. With your permission, I shall go to my uncle at Kanpur and try for a post." His father acquiesced and sent him there. But Jogin could not secure an appointment, so he spent most of his time in prayer and meditation. His absent-mindedness alarmed his uncle, who wrote to Jogin's father urging him to give his son in marriage. Nabin Chandra thought that to be the wise thing to do and made arrangements for the marriage without telling Jogin, lest he runs away. Nabin had learned this from a former experience. He then wrote to his brother-in-law to send Jogin home on the pretext of his mother's illness. With an anxious heart, Jogin came home, only to find everybody jubilant over his coming marriage. He was shocked. He told his father plainly that he was opposed to marriage. His father tried to persuade him, but he remained obdurate. Nabin was in an awkward position, for he had given his word to the bride's father. It would be utterly disgraceful to withdraw now. At last Jogin's mother came, and with tears in her eyes, implored her son to marry and save his father's reputation. "Even if you are unwilling, marry for my sake, dear," she said. The mother's passionate appeal undermined the son's firm resolution. Jogin bowed his head before the decree of fate and was married. Though he did it for the satisfaction of his mother, yet he understood what it meant for him. His marriage had ruined all his religious prospects, and besides had raised an insurmountable barrier between himself and Sri Ramakrishna. With drooping spirits, he said to himself, "Who is more wretched than the man who cannot keep his promise? Will Sri Ramakrishna love me as before? He is the embodiment of renunciation, and I shall have to pass my days in a pursuit of sense gratifications. Of what use is my going to him anymore? He marked out the path of spirituality for me, but I could not follow it. I told him of my desire to lead a celibate life, and I remember with what joy he hailed it. How can I appear before him now?" His heart sank within him as he surveyed his position. He decided not to see Sri Ramakrishna again and tried to divert his mind with business. The master heard about the marriage and was desirous of seeing the boy. He sent for him repeatedly, but Jogin did not come. Everyone said that he was different since his marriage, and that he would not even mention Sri Ramakrishna's name. As Jogin disregarded his repeated summons, Sri Ramakrishna one day called one of Jogin's friends to him and said, "What sort of a man is Jogin? Before he left for Kanpur, I lent him some rupees, of which he neither gives any account nor does he come himself, even though sent for. Will you please go and tell him this?" Jogin remembered that he had been given a few rupees to purchase some things for Sri Ramakrishna. The articles had been sent long ago to Sri Ramakrishna, but he still retained the change consisting of a few annas. At first, he thought of returning them personally, but after his marriage, he decided not to visit Sri Ramakrishna again and was on the lookout for someone through whom he could return the money. Sri Ramakrishna's complaint cut him to the quick. He said to himself, "True, I may have lost all hope, but I am not so far gone as to become a swindler. Does he really consider me so low as that? All right, I shall go and return those annas this very day." That very afternoon, Jogin started for Rani Rosmani's garden, and as he was reflecting on his hard lot, he came to the eastern veranda of Sri Ramakrishna's room, whence he saw the master seated on his small bedstead, with his cloth thrown carelessly on his lap. As soon as Sri Ramakrishna saw Jogin, he rushed forward to meet him, holding the cloth under his arm like a boy. His face shone with unusual radiance, as if he were brimming over with divine power. Catching hold of the boy's hand, he said, "What if you are married? Haven't I too been married? What is there to be afraid of in that?" Putting his hand on his own chest, "If this, meaning himself, is propitious, even 100,000 marriages will be powerless to affect you. If you desire to be in the world, bring your wife here one day, and I shall turn her mind in such a way that she will be ever a help to you in your spiritual progress. But if you are averse from a householder's life, I shall devour your attachment to the world." He was emitting fire. Jogin was stupefied. What was this that he heard? Was it possible? He felt himself suddenly transported from a region of utter despair to one of bright hope. Was it for this that Sri Ramakrishna had accused him, that he might get him to come to see him? A dead weight was lifted from his heart, and he breathed freely again. The master did not speak a word about the money, and on Jogin's referring to it, he said, "Leave it in that broken tin box." Under the eyes of the master, Jogin passed his days happily, adding new strength to his spirit of renunciation. The cloud that had gathered in his mind vanished completely, and life again appeared worth living. His parents murmured at his indifference to the world. One day, his mother said, "If you don't care to earn money, well, why did you marry?" "Didn't I tell you again and again," replied Jogin, "that I had no intention of marrying? But I had to give way to your tears." "What do you mean?" exclaimed the mother. How could you marry unless you had the desire to do so? Jogin stared at her. Gracious God, he said to himself. I committed the act to please my mother, and now she talks like this. Fie on the world. Sri Ramakrishna is the only person I have met whose words and thoughts tally exactly. From that day, he was disgusted with the world, and finding his only solace in the company of Sri Ramakrishna, spent the days and sometimes the nights in the temple garden. The master was not slow to detect Jogin's one great failing, his extreme softness of heart. He warned the boy against this weakness. One day, Jogin was sent to the market to buy a pan. He appealed to the religious feeling of the shopkeeper and asked him to supply a good article. The purchase finished, he returned home, but it was afterwards found that the pan had a crack in it. When the master heard of it, he said to Jogin reproachfully, "A devotee must not be a fool. A shopkeeper is not thinking of God at all when dealing with his customers. In trusting him, you acted stupidly. You should have examined the pan before purchasing it. See that you be not deceived thus in future. When you go out shopping, first know the real price by going round several shops and thoroughly examine the thing before you buy. And don't fail to demand the little extras where allowable." Is it not marvelous to hear such advice from a man who, perhaps a minute before, had been plunged into the bliss of samadhi? But Sri Ramakrishna was full of such contrasts. Jogin was gentle to a fault. One day, Sri Ramakrishna found a cockroach among his clothes. He asked Jogin to take it outside and kill it. The boy took it to some distance and let it go. The master inquired if he had carried out the order. Jogin told him what he had done. Thereupon Sri Ramakrishna rebuked him, saying, "I told you to kill it, and you let it go. You must carry out my orders to the very letter, or you will have to repent in more serious matters." Another day, Jogin was in a boat on his way to Dakshineshwar. One of the passengers, when he learned of Jogin's destination, began to vilify Sri Ramakrishna, even calling him names. Jogin was mortified and was on the point of launching into a vindication of the master, when he realized that it was ignorance of the master's real nature that prompted the criticism. So he decided to say nothing. On reaching Dakshineshwar, he narrated the incident to Sri Ramakrishna. He thought that the master would simply laugh, but to his surprise he said, "The man abused me, and you pocketed the insult without a murmur. Do you know what the scriptures advise in such a case? One should either kill the vilifier or leave the place at once. And you bore it tamely." It was to put some mettle into the boy that the master treated the incident thus. The listener will remember in this connection the very different advice he gave to another disciple of his, namely Niranjan, on a similar occasion. It was his idea to lead the boys in his charge to perfect harmony, of which his own life was the brilliant example. So we find him putting metal into the one and toning down the fiery nature of the other. The prescriptions in both cases were suited to the nature of the disease. As already remarked, Sri Ramakrishna often encouraged his disciples to test him before accepting him as their guide. He always advised them to notice if the religious teacher practiced what he preached. One evening, Jogin, with the master's permission, decided to spend the night with him, with a view to serving him if needful. They went to bed. At midnight, Jogin suddenly woke up to find the door of the room open and Sri Ramakrishna absent. At first he thought that he might be walking outside, but he was not. Suddenly a suspicion came to his mind. Could he have gone to see his wife? Could it possibly be that his actions were contrary to his teachings? Unpleasant though the thought was, he resolved to ascertain the truth, and he kept watch upon the door of the concert room, where the Holy Mother lived. Suddenly, he heard the sound of slippers from the direction of the Panchavati. A moment later, Sri Ramakrishna stood by his side. "Well, what do you want here?" he asked. Jogin hung his head in shame for having doubted the master and could not utter a word. The master understood at once and relieved the boy by saying, "Well done. You must examine a sadhu by day and also by night before believing in him." Though forgiven, Jogin could not sleep any more that night. According to the rules of the Kali temple, every day Sri Ramakrishna received a portion of the offerings made to the deities. One morning, he found that his share had not been sent to his room. This irregularity disturbed him, so that he himself went to the office to inquire about it. Jogin was surprised at this, for he knew the master did not care much about eating. It was inexplicable to him, except as a remnant of the priestly instinct to exact what was one's due. He was amused at the thought that in spite of his great realizations, the master could not overcome the petty tendencies of his class. At this moment, Sri Ramakrishna returned and said, "Look here, Rani Rosmani has bequeathed her large estate to the service of this temple, so that the offerings may be distributed among devotees and sadhus. That part of the offerings which comes to this room is taken only by devotees who come here with a yearning for God, and the gift of Rosmani is turned to good account. But what use is made of the other part which goes to the priests of this temple? They sell in the market, and some even feed their mistresses with it. I fight with the men in charge for the share that comes here, in order that Rosmani's object may be at least partially fulfilled." And so Jogin discovered that every act of the master, no matter how trivial it might appear, was freighted with deep significance. Sri Ramakrishna gave Jogin much liberty, as he knew that the boy was one of the mother's chosen few. He called him also Anwavering, a rare distinction to which only half a dozen of the master's disciples could aspire. Under the loving care of Sri Ramakrishna, Jogin grew to be a man who completely triumphed over the sex idea. He was renunciation personified. I hope you like this chapter. We need volunteers and sponsors to create content with even better quality and with more variety. If you wish to join this initiative as a volunteer or sponsor, please click the links given in description below. To help us reach more viewers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Biography Central. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Namaste.